to Mastering the Art of Parenting Your Highly Sensitive Child. My name is Katie, and today I'm here with Alejandra Proaño. She's a bilingual Spanish-English registered clinical counselor living in Vancouver. She facilitates the Healing Anger online groups for women, the Healing Triggers trauma groups for women, and co-owns Moose Anger Management with her partner, Alistair, who started this 28 years ago working with men. They now lead a team of 10 very skilled therapists who often support parents. Alejandra has been published in scientific journals, academic books, and poetry books. She has her BA in psychology, a specialization in family therapies, a Master of Clinical Psychology, a Master of Science, and a Master of Arts in Literature. But most importantly, she has done lots of work to overcome trauma and self-destructive anger. Over the last 7 years, she has formally studied the work of Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Peter Levine toward a compassionate and embodied psychotherapy practice. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Katie. I appreciate what you're doing in order to share this with so many parents that will love the resources.
I hope so. I think it's so important to share because especially neurodiverse and highly sensitive parents or parents of children there's a lot on our plate, right? So I think the more resources that are sort of available to us to support us and to normalize the experiences that we're going through will really benefit our journey.
Yes.
So, yeah. I'd love if you'd like to share a little bit about what sort of inspired you to follow your beautiful journey and path into learning. You obviously have such a love for learning.
I do. Yeah. My parents, I talked to them last night and he's like, oh, every time you're studying, you're just so happy. So thank you, because I'm a total nerd. And when you invite me here, I want to know everything. So it's, I'm going back to school every time I have something to talk about. So basically, well, I think I had no choice. It was a blend of destiny and good decisions, but the good decisions probably were done because I had made very bad decisions. So maybe I had no choice, really. I like to joke that, I had so much anger stored in me that I managed to do 3 master's degrees and cross the continent in order to get to peaceful Canada. So here I am, loved to have a space where I can safely talk and explore about anger. Yeah, I think it's we have so much prejudice. There's so much stigma around women's anger. And like you noticed, me writing poetry was one of the ways that I worked through my trauma and my anger. And this is just the continuation of my journey. So yeah, it's exciting.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I think we all find different tools to help us. I know art was a big tool for me. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And like you were saying, and we had a conversation probably about 6 months ago about anger and its role with genders, which we'll get to in just a little bit. But I'd love if you'd like to share a little bit about your thoughts on anger. It's a difficult emotion. We don't normally talk about these more unpleasant emotions, but it's important we do to bring it out into the light.
Yeah. So anger is amazing, right? We couldn't be here today if we were not being able to protect ourselves. Anger is an emotion that drives us to achieve things, to change what we don't like about the status quo. Anger is also the guardian of our boundaries. And so imagine if we are in a dysregulated nervous system response, like us freezing, we are disoriented to what is a threat, what is safe, what is not safe. We don't have that capacity. So it's so incredibly empowering to be able to say no, to be able to say no, thank you, or we need to stop this because I love you and this is not working. So anger brings a lot of healing and a lot of possibilities for change. Anger is not a bad emotion. Some people call it a negative affect, or it's not pleasant to experience it, but in some it depends on the frequency, the intensity of the emotion. So when we talk about anger, we can talk about frustration, but we can also be speaking about rage. So what are we talking about here?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not the anger that is a negative thing. The thing is, what do we do with that? How do we respond to it? How do others respond to our anger? How can we make anger a safe emotion? How can we make it so that we are befriending this emotion that has so much stigma, and we're so afraid of it because we mix it or we confuse it with violence or with aggression.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and as we were talking about, it's expressed so differently in boys and girls often. As we were talking about, women tend to repress it more, whereas boys are usually allowed to share it a little more visibly. I'd love if you'd elaborate a little on that.
Of course. So it's interesting, right? Because most of my experience is through the parents that come to see us.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last 10 years, I've been more and more been specializing on women's anger, whether that is internalized and completely like a disconnection. Like many of my clients are like, I can't be angry, like I can't even connect to that emotion, or they're totally connected to that emotion and it's the only thing they can almost feel.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of anxiety on most of the women that come to see us are very anxious about their anger. And so that anxiety works as a wall where they cannot connect healthily to their anger and rather just repress it. And then we will eventually, explode.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of anxiety about anger because most of the times we've had previous partners or in our family of origin or wherever we grew up, anger was not a good thing. And so people, again, think that anger is something else. Mm-hmm. And so restoring that relationship in a way that feels empowering, that feels like, oh, this is, for example, I feel anger. I could yell at you, but I'm not. I'm just feeling my power. And I just want to let you know that this is not okay. Mm-hmm. So how beautiful can that be? Mm-hmm. Compared to this dysregulated anger, which is like the cartoon version of anger that we all have in our minds. So again, there's huge anger is a genderized emotion, unfortunately. There was a study that I wanted to share with you. This was a meta-analytic review. So a meta-analysis is just the studies of the studies. And they, what they did was they wanted to look at the gender difference on the emotion expression in children. And this study was done in 2013, and it included 166 studies that had more than 21,709 participants. And reading the abstract so that I can share this with you. So what they found was that in preschool, there were little differences on the expression of emotion that were based on sex or gender. Mm-hmm. But girls showed up more positive emotions than boys in middle school or teenage years. And boys, in contrast, they showed greater externalization of emotions, particularly anger,
Mhm.
in toddler already, in toddler and also preschool and middle school periods. And this just means that the way we are shaping our kids has a big impact on them. So, for example, girls, this study is very long and it's fascinating. It looks like people socialized as girls are more invited to be more nice and to show, to look at the greater good and compromise. And boys are more expected to show aggression and anger. So this doesn't mean that it's all good or all bad. For example, the negative part of boys here is that they would create more conduct problems because teachers would like people that cooperate. But in the long run, if you look at the relationship between chronic anger or chronic stress and gender, you will find that the more we internalize, which is what these little girls are already doing, is what takes us to have these autoimmune diseases or these ways that our body is showing that, it's not okay to just continually repress and feel resentment and not being able to go out and resolve conflict openly. So this is just an example of how we're permeating these responses in our society.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because especially like for parents who either are highly sensitive or neurodivergent or have children who are, there are, in a way, extra demands on us, and very often we have a smaller window of tolerance,
Correct.
capacity to deal with it. And then you couple that with the conscious parenting, which, and sorry, I put that in quotations because it has a beautiful, pure meaning in my experience, but it's often taken as perfection in parenting, which is a total disservice to ourselves and to our children. And if we're taught to repress, then we feel so much guilt and shame when we do have this, especially as mothers, this anger experience, and we tend to either hold it in, but then if we need to let it out, we feel guilty, or we become erratic parents and then can't provide that secure attachment foundation for our children. So it's really like, it's complex how it weaves.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you're saying because there's not going to be an easy way for us to learn. We are that generation. You guys are that generation. The parents that are wanting to be conscious, that want to do better, we're going to be the generation that are going to be struggling with this. And we have, all our lineage, of all the women previous to our generation we're carrying all that. So it's a lot. So it even sounds like a more of a chore what I'm going to tell you, right? That you need more extra care, right? Even that can feel exhausting. But the more that we allow ourselves to be with our kids in this developmental process, the more that we allow ourselves to be like, okay, I'm learning with you. Yeah, I'm your mom, but I'm also learning. The more that the shame will kind of disappear in terms of I should be the adult, and when I'm out of control, I'm going to try to get control of everything. And if I lose control, I have nobody to talk to because it's even scary or it feels unsafe for me to even say that I've raised my voice to my child. So
and I have been that parent. I think we all have. And as I was saying with Kelsey, I mean, it depends obviously on the child's age and situation and everything, but taking a step back and acknowledging, like I I was out of line, how I reacted, and having a fairly open conversation with them and exploring other tools can be helpful. Like, we're not perfect, and putting that perfection on us also puts the perfection on our children.
Correct. And so the perfection is just like a trauma response, right? The perfection is going to create so much anxiety on us. And so we don't want to be super parents. We want to be just parents. We want to be just human beings. But anger is that superpower. Anger would be, if you're overriding, if every time that things go wrong at home, you feel like I got to still keep on going, that is something that you're probably, saving somewhere. And you're going to get stiff. And you're going to be unwanting to socialize. You probably going to get disorientated, and then maybe you're going to jump into freeze, or you're going to go the other way into fight or flight. You can be that mother that is always in a rush. So much compassion, but our culture asks too much for parents. So it is kind of like an impossible situation. So on these little moments where the chaos happens is the moment when we can try to go into integration, rather than what most of the people in my generation and I lived, which was like there was no conversations about what happened, no integration between the right brain and the left brain. That means, the emotions and the rational mind. So we as kids, we can't integrate what happened, and our parents, they have no idea what happened either, and they don't want to talk about it because they're in so much shame. So the invitation would be to, okay, like I'm having these big emotions and they're in charge of me and I'm in fight or flight. I need to take a break, and until my big emotions can be protected by my rational brain. And this takes time already. We need at least an hour to de-escalate for the adrenaline and the corticoids and the noradrenaline, all the stress hormones to go back to homeostasis and to a place where we can actually be kind to others. And tell me, what parent has time? Right. So
do you mind briefly explaining what you were doing with your hands, the triune approach, and how that is connected to the sympathetic and parasympathetic responses?
Of course. So this would be the upstairs brain. This would be the amygdala, the one that turns the alarm on that there is something wrong happening. And when the amygdala turns on, it takes over our life. And sometimes we make great decisions when the amygdala is on. We're driving, something happens, we have to make a quick decision and we save someone's life. We did not think about it. That was completely our instincts taking over. But in most situations in our life, we don't need to go there. And if we go there, we're going to talk about that later, how we can work on our triggers. But when the kids, for example, go into fight or flight, so that means that we're not doing this. The amygdala is not protected by our prefrontal cortex. This means that we are like this. So when that happens, that's not a great time to rationalize with our kids. That is not a right time to tell them what they should be doing. You're going to waste your time and you're going to put more fire. What we want to do then, it's more like approach them with our limbic system. So say, you're feeling upset. Talk about the emotion. I understand. And then just some connection, which might be not to go and hold them, not we want to leave them feeling all these things, but just kind of assessing that they're safe, right? And that they can express their temper tantrum, which is completely the opposite of what we're taught of. Like if the kid is doing a temper tantrum, shut it down. And it's the complete opposite. It's like they're having their moment, their brain is not developed, and they need support. But in that moment, the only support we can give them is that it's safe for them to express that emotion. And then we can inquire, I wonder what was happening, because maybe that event was disproportionate to what was happening. That emotion, was disproportionate to what was happening. Maybe we can later get curious and say, I was wondering, what happened at school today, or be curious. But what would happen when I was growing up is I would just be sent to my room. There was no conversation after. And then everybody was acting like everything was fine. And I was always walking on eggshells.
Yep.
So this kind of like really simplified model of the brain is helpful for them to know, oh, I am here, I'm not here. So you can slowly introduce them into, the integration, which is what we want for ourselves and for their kids. Instead of creating developmental trauma, which is what most of us suffer these days when we didn't have parents that had any emotional education. Anger was shut down, and then we were frozen for years, or we wouldn't want to say hello to Uncle Pepito, and we had to say hello to Uncle Pepito, and our boundaries were crossed over and over again. So we don't want that. We want this healthy expression of anger.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to the fact that we are animals and we need to be able to, like animals who have experienced whatever kind of trauma it is, we need to be able to express it, to process it and let it go. So through sound, through movement, through through breath, whatever it is, but being able to let it out in a healthy way.
Yes.
Rather than suppressing it till we get to a rage stage. So it's similar, like you were saying, sort of to anxiety. Anxiety is can also be a friend, but we see the extreme presentation of it very often. And so that's what we connect with anxiety, that it's negative when it's these emotions are serving us. It's just finding a way to listen to them before they become disproportionate.
Right.
Like
and something that I'm really excited is on the research on the vagus nerve. Because I feel like that research is exactly what we needed in our lives when we don't have a minute to breathe. There's so many things that we can do to support our nervous system that just takes a minute. So I feel like, that was just right on time for humanity. So I don't know if you talked about this before, but the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in our body, and it's completely connected to even to our tummy. So when we promote vagus nerve connection, we're also promoting emotional regulation. We're promoting calmness, and we're promoting trust, empathy. And so when we have this connection, we're going to be also more prone to make that change between freeze and engaging on pro-social behaviors.
Yeah. We spoke about it a little bit before, the vagus nerve, just as a quick recap. The vagus nerve is the 10th craniosacral nerve, so it's connecting our sensory organs in our eyes, ears, mouth, face, to be able to perceive danger or being in a safe space. And then that information goes to our brainstem, basically gets sent out as neurotransmitters through our vagus nerve to the various organs to tell us to respond in a sympathetic, a stress state, or in parasympathetic, a rest, digest, socialize state. And there's also obviously hormones that go out through, not obviously, but hormones that go out through our blood to also reinforce our response. And I think you're going to share one of my favorite exercises with us. There's also 2 accessory nerves, part of the craniosacral system, that go from our jaw basically to our clavicle and then through our traps, which allow for range of motion to be able to perceive danger. So this complex system is a byway, which is important so that we can just to understand how to support our nervous system, really. I think it's very important information to understand that, like, these are normal responses. This is our biology, and we can work with it. So I'd love if you want to share
Of course.
your exercise, or maybe you'd like to save it for the end.
Let's do it.
Okay, cool.
So fingers interwoven. Let's put the hands behind the head. If you can lie down on the floor, excellent. If not, you can just imagine that you're lying so you have a straight posture on your spine. And then we're going to look to the right with our eyes closed, if that's more accessible. And we're just going to keep our eyes on the right for a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds. And then we're going to go back to center and eyes to the left. And then back to center. If you notice that you're swallowing saliva or you have a nice exhalation, all those things are signs that your nervous system is being regulated. And the other option to go into social engagement is, especially with our kids, that's so helpful, is you just doing kind eyes. So, like, the experience of when we did something wrong, we were kids and our mother or our parents or our caregivers gave us the shameful look. That's not going to help. So when you give your kids the kind eyes look, in some cases, right? Because I know that some kids might not be so easily reading our facial expressions, but even then, they can kind of like observe our general sensations of our general emotion vibe. I'm sure there's a way to say it. And they're going to learn that it's safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that exercise. It's from Stanley Rosenberg. It's one of my favorites. And I find, and sometimes it can take a bit of practice, especially if you're in a more chronic stress or a heightened state, but the more you practice it, it's like you can instantly drop in. It's so
I love what
powerful.
you're saying, because, and I have the book here, I'm going to share it with the people that are, and I brought this book out because he specifically has some exercises for autism spectrum and all sorts of fun stuff. And so when I first started doing these exercises, vagal nerve, I was like, what is this? A waste of time, that's where we go. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I got that breath. And then the more that you do them, the more that your body's going to create that connection. And the easiest you can get yourself out of these fight or flight or freeze responses.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. sort of touching on that, we spoke a little bit about developmental trauma. Would you like to share a little bit about when, as parents, we know we need to work on a piece?
Very good point. So I think, okay, let's just put a hypothetical situation when, your kid was having a hard time, but you got very, very triggered about what was going on. And maybe then you don't want to think about it, or you just want to put that situation apart, get over it. You don't even want to think about it. But maybe we are shaming ourselves for that reaction we had, or maybe we just override it and minimize it. Just a natural response to our poorly nurtured social upbringing. But then maybe we can just bring some compassion, some curiosity to what happened. And I mean, I am trained to do this on psychotherapy. I have a very clean process about how to do it. And we usually go to a moment in the past where it's like, oh, okay, so this is the reason why that it's happening right now, it's so difficult. But you can talk to a friend and, someone that you can brainstorm with and ask, okay, what would be the other, where do you feel it in your body, right? Where do you feel it in your body? And do a little bit of somatic work. Well, what color would that be? So for example, it's in the chest, it's red and it's stiff. And I used to feel like that when I was growing up. So you go there and you notice that what's going on with your child has little to do, or a little bit to do with what happened, but a lot to do with our lack of integration of something that felt overwhelming and very hard back then. So if we do this, we will not be, bringing our own stuff to the children's behavior. So these big reactions usually just create more kind of developmental trauma, because then the kid is like, oh, then I can't be angry, or I can't be sad, or they don't know what's happening and they don't integrate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important. And I actually remember something my mom told me, I think when I was a child. I can't remember what the context was, but I remember her saying, it's always the behavior, never the person, when we're talking about an emotion or something that went wrong. So just sort of, you kind of touched on it, but like being careful to not label the child like the child's being angry or misbehaving. It's like, this is the experience they're going through, the behavior that's showing up. And it can be hard as a parent when you're heightened as well, and there's so many demands going on, to really be present and hold space for that.
Yeah. So I usually work with, the first person on the ancestral lineage that want to resolve or reconceptualize what anger is and our relationship with anger. So this is not like a change that will happen from morning to night, right? But we are probably, our amygdala is probably super overpassed of powering through for generations. And these come up as automatic responses, or what Gabor Mate brilliantly calls, brilliant strategy to accommodate to the situation, a brilliant adaptation strategy. And maybe we did that when we were kids. That was a brilliant strategy for us to just hold back the anxiety or the anger and not say a word. Maybe that's safe. And when you're an adult, you're like, okay, this is not helping me anymore. I need to change these patterns. And so the patterns changing is a little bit of a long game. Not going to happen from morning to night, but so worth it.
Definitely. And I think
worth it.
Yeah. And like you said, going back to that curiosity and compassion, in which, again, requires us to nourish ourselves, that we have the presence to be able to explore that. It's a lot of work being a parent. It's a lot of work. And like I put in a lot of time taking out all of the, or what I thought was all of the garbage back then before having children. And I still notice things coming up, and it's difficult, obviously, but it's an opportunity for us to grow with our children symbiotically. And I really do believe that they are teachers.
Yeah.
And as challenging as it can be, it does present a beautiful opportunity to, if we're able to give ourselves that space, change the patterns
Correct.
in the past, ourselves, and for our future generations. But it does take work, and having that compassion and patience for ourselves is key. It's never complete, unfortunately, but we get closer and closer to
Yeah.
our purest expression, I guess.
Yes. I love the way you've expressed that, Katie.
Thank you.
You know, we're going to continue to change our neurobiology as we are parents and as we are adults with others. And the way that we're doing it, I think that we are also being more compassionate to other parents and to our own kids. You know, the other day I was researching about neurodiverse children, and something that really struck me is that maybe they feel too much. So how does my perception of what is right and what is wrong change when, oh my gosh, when I feel too much, it's a lot. So I can just imagine how much they're feeling, that they don't even want to talk about it, or they don't have the words to express it, and just so much compassion and so much you know, like even like at our of this yeah, of everybody in you know, of people in general, because we're all so different. Saying that when we work with somebody that has gone through a lot of trauma, and they might have a lot of layers of protection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of the different tools that we've explored through the summit, and even this one that you were sharing, is a really powerful one for children who maybe aren't verbal, or who are so overcome with emotion. That's an easy sign to share with parents, and being able to provide a safe space to sort of support moving through whatever the emotion is so key. So thank you very much for sharing that. Is there any other a little takeaway or anything else that you'd like to add before we?
Another great resource is the mood meter, created by Yale University. There's a chart for kids, but I love to use it for parents too. It helps us to create more, to learn about emotional nuances. So just notice that there's not only anger, there's different kinds of intensities, and maybe sometimes it's pleasurable or unpleasurable. So emotions can be divided on this quadrant of pleasant, unpleasant, and intensity. And anger can be there too. And what I like about this app, I think it's $1.89, so everybody can have it, is that it also asks you, do you want to stay in this space, or do you want to change it? So it goes the extra step of, oh, I can change it. I can go and have a sip of water, and it's not going to act like this, but the fact that I'm thinking that I can change it is already going to create a different, a sense of opportunity, and a sense that I'm not going to stay in this difficult emotion forever.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And sorry, what's the app called?
Mood meter.
Okay, cool.
The meter of moods.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about finding the tools that resonate for you. And obviously they change through our journeys, but the more tools that we have that help us come into our body so that we can nourish ourselves and our children, the better.
I agree.
Thank you very much for being with us and sharing your insights today. I really appreciate it, Alejandra.
My pleasure. Thank you, Katie.